Hello and welcome back to Widowed AF. You're here with your host, Rosie Gill-Moss, and joining me today, I have got Clare Hardy. Hello, Clare.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us. Now, you came about coming on the podcast slightly differently because you approached me directly and you felt that a certain part of society had not yet been represented, and that is the lesbian community. So I was absolutely delighted to get your email, and I'm even more delighted to have you on to talk about it. Now, I know very little because that is how I tend to do these interviews. I know that your wife, Rupa, had Hodgkin's lymphoma and essentially died from cellulitis. And with all my guests, I always want to just say to you, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry that you have lost your person, because you think that you become immune doing this job and listening to people talk about these losses, and you don't. Every single one really, really stings. So I'm super proud of you. I don't know you, but I'm super proud of you for coming on and doing this. And I think I'm going to let you take over now and just tell our audience just what happened to you guys.
Sure. So, I met Rupa over 10 years ago, and I think on our first date, she told me that she had a few years ago had lymphoma, and that she had stopped her treatment early, and that she had changed her diet to quite a restrictive, dramatic diet, and that she felt that she was like cancer free. So and then she sort of very quickly afterwards said, "But I'm not crazy." I was like, "Okay, I'm not judging you. I'm naturally a skeptic about everything." So I think we were on the night bus when she told me, because it was before Uber. So we were going back to Walthamstow in East London, where I lived at the time. And she was like, I guess she was just like, right, so there it is, sort of thing.
Yeah,
so
let's
I
get
knew
this
what I
out
was
in the
getting
open.
into.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I get that.
So that.
So when you say she followed a restricted diet, so she had sort of gone more an alternative treatment.
Yeah. So
okay.
she started having chemo, and I'm sure a lot of people know what chemo is like. I've never had to experience it, but she said she felt like the chemo was killing her, like more than the cancer.
Yes.
Which I think she's still, she's still like stuck to basically the whole time. Like she just thought, how on earth can this, like, especially long term, give your life back? So there aren't really alternatives in the mainstream to having chemotherapy. She had an operation as well, so she had the lump that she'd found removed. But the first time, it was before I knew her, so I didn't know a great deal about, the day-to-day exactly what happened, apart from that, obviously we talked about it a lot during our relationship.
That's quite a brave thing to do, to enter into a relationship with somebody that has a condition that is as serious as Hodgkin's lymphoma.
But so it's kind of, but I was like 26, she was 36 at the time, and she felt she was completely over it. I was like, whatever, it's your body, sort of thing. And you don't really know, do you, when you start going out with someone? You don't think that, often, I think women often do think, oh, we're going to have kids and get married and blah, blah, blah. But you don't know how it's going to work out, really.
Well,
so I was just like, oh, well,
we know that better than most, right?
Yeah. Indeed, yeah. So, yeah. And it was always, I sort of challenged it quite often, especially, in the sort of early few years, because I was like, there's no actual evidence for any of this. But when she had 2 like sessions, I think, of chemotherapy, I don't know what the exact dose was that she had. And she had the surgery on her lymph gland the first time, to take the actual lump away. That was the initial, she found it and realised she had cancer. And everybody said to her, if you stop this chemo, you will die. At the first time when I think she would have been about 32, 33. So she was told that a lot of times by medics, friends, like everyone really. And obviously she didn't die that time. So she didn't go to like the follow-up appointments I think she went to some, but she didn't have all the treatment that they wanted her to do.
Do you think that gave her like a sort of like a cloak of invincibility almost?
Definitely.
She sort of felt, well, I haven't. You told me I would die, and I haven't. So
yeah. But I mean, unfortunately, so that we had 10 years almost of her being completely, as far as we knew, well. She had these odd little things that, you always look back, don't you? And she had strange little things, like she'd always get, impetigo? It's like a skin infection, and she'd get that recurrently, like over and over again, really badly. And because it would be near her eye, she'd always get like fast tracked to really strong antibiotics each time. And then she had the first thing, I think she had an ear infection, ear infections are really bad, aren't they? So painful. And that must have been sort of autumn 2022. And it took her ages to shake it off. And we'd all had COVID that January as well, when the baby was still quite small. And Rupa had laryngitis for weeks afterwards. So yeah, since the COVID, there were these weird sort of immune system things that she just couldn't really shake off. Then she got a cough, and the cough never went. So she had the cough for sort of probably the last 6 months of her life. She had reflux, and then like the last, like the first really major, like, because you might have gathered that she wasn't one to go to the doctor or trust in conventional medicine very, willingly. So, but she started getting edema in her ankles, so like swollen ankles where she was retaining fluid. And so, because of, I guess, the way the NHS works, they were trying to rule out heart failure first, because obviously that kills one quicker.
It's rule out the thing that will kill you first, isn't it?
Yeah. And then there's obviously Christmas. So we went to my parents in Wales for Christmas. So there was a break from any kind of like going to the doctors or anything then. And then she got the results of a chest x-ray after Christmas, and that was fine. So she was like, oh, I don't have lung cancer. That's good, because she'd had this cough for a really long time. But obviously, because when she was in her early 30s and she had lymphoma, she hadn't had like symptoms, because she was so young and she caught it early. She didn't know that lymphoma gives you edema because you can't drain your tissue, or that it attacks your immune system. So, and seeing a GP, they're not specialists. So none of these things sort of linked together in anyone's mind. I think it was there, but because I knew she wouldn't have chemo.
So I'm just going to jump a little bit into your story, mainly because we have just, seen your child. How many children do you have?
We've got 2. So the older one was born in 2019, so he's now 4. He was 3 when all of this was going on.
So he's just started school, presumably.
He has, yeah. He's
and that's tough without your
doing quite well, but
that first walk down the
Sorry.
No, it's me. I'm terrible for talking over people.
All right.
I'm just picturing that walk when you kind of watch them walk down the path into the classroom, and you haven't got your wife next to you, sharing that moment.
I don't know. It's kind of different because so we've got a complicated financial situation going on, doesn't everyone? And my wife was quite well off. She was quite well off when I met her, and she's sort of got family arrangements that mean we didn't sort of have a mortgage together and stuff like that. So when we were planning to, I've moved to Cardiff quite recently, and when we were first planning to move, we were planning a different, initially nursery and then the school attached to it that was actually independent, in a different part of Cardiff. And she wasn't really into the whole like traditional schooling thing. I think she was thinking of homeschooling originally, but then when we had our son, she changed her mind.
Well, as you're probably aware, I was embarking on a year of homeschool, but I have been.
Yeah.
I found out today if I've been saved by the finance committee who are making a decision on whether my child can access it. Is an independent school, but it's a specialist independent school.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, the sort of going to school, it wouldn't have happened in the same way if she'd been alive. So it's kind of, it's not like something she was sort of looking forward to, especially. I don't think, like, she was looking forward to the childcare, but she was kind of she didn't like the idea of not being able to go on holiday basically in term time. That was her main motivation.
Yeah, watching your holidays quadruple before your eyes. Yes.
She was quite a queen of holidays, I think.
Was she?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very pleased now, but we went on 8. Well, she went on 8 trips. We went on 7 as a family in 2022 alone.
Wow.
So, you know, because you couldn't really book things reliably during COVID, could you? And we were going to go on one last big trip during my first maternity leave to Lanzarote, and it got cancelled because it was going to be May 2020. So obviously Lanzarote
not the best time
closed.
for travel.
Yeah. So we went on a lot of UK holidays in 2022, and she was very good at, you know, finding good value for money and stuff. So I'm really glad we did that now.
But I bet you are.
She was really reticent about the idea that we'd be limited to school holidays, because also she didn't really like other people, so you know how busy.
Right, okay, yeah. I'm relating to your wife actually. And although I have to say, until they're 5, you can take them out of school legally.
Yes, I'm keeping that.
And I actually have apologies to any teachers listening, and I think there is a limit to how much you can do this. But for example, 3 of my children have 2 weeks off for October. One has 1 week off. So I would like to do our big family holiday next October, because I think going away abroad in the summer is kind of pointless often. Anyway, and I'm just thinking, well, I'm just going to pull her out for a week and pay the fine, because I can do work. I'm going to take them to like Bali or somewhere. We're going to go and see something way more than they can learn in a classroom, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So I am going to ask the question, because as a straight woman, I only have an experience of, you know, male, female making babies. Can I ask who carried them, whether you used embryos? I'm being nosy. You don't have to tell me.
So with the first one, they were both just sort of donor insemination. So I guess to the layperson, turkey baster. So I know it's a bit of a more complicated version, but so I carried them both. And we chose this, 2 South Asian donors because Rupa's South Asian, so we thought that made sense for us.
Yeah.
So the first time, Davey, you could actually order donated sperm to be delivered to the UK from Denmark, just in a big, what's it called, liquid nitrogen tank.
Yeah.
And it comes in these tiny, they look like miniature popsicles of sperm, and
gross.
You open it and steam comes out in your bedroom, right? And then I put about 5 pairs of latex gloves on, because I was terrified of getting a cold burn. Pull up this little cup with where the little straws are, the little popsicles, and take one out, hold it in your hand until it's liquid again, get a syringe, and then it goes
off you go.
Same place. Yeah.
I mean, I bet there's been less romantic pregnancies made.
Probably. So, and this was before Brexit, so you could just get anything delivered to the UK. And then when my daughter was conceived, that sperm bank had been basically forced, I think, to stop shipping sperm anywhere.
Stop shipping frozen sperm.
Yeah. And also Brexit had happened, so you had to get it delivered to a clinic.
Right.
So then I had to basically pay 900 quid each time for the same thing, plus the sperm, plus import charges, because of course Brexit, you can just charge stupid money for nothing. So there was a lot of money for nothing. But I think I was more keen, like I was more desperate to get pregnant the second time because I knew what I'd be missing out on. Whereas the first time I was like, obviously free and single and I was just enjoying life.
And, do you know, I can really
and
relate
I thought, I don't know if I can have kids, whatever, we'll see if it
it's
works.
like a bonus if I can, kind of thing.
Yeah. But the second time I was like, I'm gonna do anything to conceive,
and you know what's coming, you know that love. I remember thinking about, we were kind of debating whether to have a third, and I'm very lucky. I've not had fertility problems at all. And we really kind of went back and forth, Ben and I, because we thought, we have two healthy children. Do we want to roll that dice again? Do we want to risk it? And we're very fortunate we had another healthy child. But and it is that knowledge of, if anything goes wrong, you know what you're losing now, and it's scary.
And I do feel like we've been very lucky with their health as well, because I was quite lucky. I took a sort of normal amount of time to conceive. Like, I was so lucky to just have two straightforward pregnancies, two straightforward births, and touch wood so far, like completely healthy kids. Like, they've never.
You find something wood to touch, right?
Lots of wood. Especially now that the oldest is away at school, and it's good.
It's really weird because then you're no longer the centre of their world, are you? No. Tabitha's just gone into year 1, and it's a little bit easier this time. But I see all the kind of reception mums in the playground, and I think, it's scary. Now, when you decided to have children together, were you aware that there was a possibility that you may end up raising these children alone?
Well, I probably should have been,
But, I ask it because your body is very clever and protecting you from things. And
I mean, it honestly didn't, because I hadn't been there for the first cancer episode, and she was very good at presenting her. And she was a very strong-willed person, my wife. And
I'm hearing this, actually.
Yeah. And so, you do just, you get completely, we're just completely taken up with just living, really. And she actually tried to get pregnant and didn't manage. So that was our first sort of heartbreak, really. And that was our focus, and actually she said in the end, she said, when I was having stitches in a certain area, she said, I'm so glad that I get to have the babies, and I didn't actually.
But you get to do the work,
so much better.
Yes.
So it was always the focus, really, of our relationship, was having babies. So and actually she persuaded me I was never gonna get pregnant. I was really, really anti. And then I went from, before I got pregnant, I was like, okay, maybe I'll have one child, but I'm going to have an elective C-section. Not that that's easy, but I was like, I don't want anything to do with anything natural happening.
Yeah.
And I ended up having, I had an assisted delivery, the first one, but it was pretty natural apart from that. And the second one was a home birth, sort of, mooing.
You went full
and total
hippie.
Earth mother, yeah.
Yeah.
And I got really geeky into like free birth and like, you know,
hypnobirth?
ancient birth rites and just people doing it on their own in the woods and stuff like that.
I've heard this. I mean, I had
Yeah.
3 cesareans with mine.
Right, yeah.
And so I have a very different experience.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I wanted the bath and, you know, the
Yeah.
gentle music and I wanted it to
Yeah.
all be kind of non-sterile and really set. But when it comes down to having your children, you know, you're just
Yeah.
like, okay, just
I
whatever
mean,
it
yeah,
takes.
I didn't care what the surrounding was at the time.
No, you don't care.
In
In fact,
who
I
was
think
there.
with one of them, I was just begging just to knock me the fuck out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
but
you're going
yeah,
along
so yeah.
So you're going along and you're sort of living this life. You've successfully managed to have 2 children.
Yeah.
You know, life is, I'm presumably, I'm assuming is happy. You're kind of, I call
Yeah.
it like living the normal life, you know, the one you
Yeah.
expected to live.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And presumably there was a considerable deterioration if she was able to go
Yeah,
from
it
being
was
part of a
quick. It
family
was
life.
brutal. Yeah. So the edema had started before Christmas. And then the other thing, is when you actually list it in retrospect, it's a crazy number of things that she was living with and just like trying to carry on as normal. So she had like muscle wasting. So she was really struggling to get up the stairs. And every new symptoms, I was like, go to the GP, and she was like, oh, I've got an appointment next week anyway. And it's like, and she's like, I'm not going to do, you know, she was like, if it is cancer sort of thing, like whisper it, I'm not going to do the treatment. So what's the point? And I was like, but wouldn't you like to know if you've got cancer or not? Like, so yeah, so we got back from Christmas and then she got her chest x-ray results, which were okay. So like relaxed a bit about not having, you know, some sort of cancer on the lung or something. But still, you know, she was getting sort of weaker and tireder. She'd lost loads of weight. She had been trying to lose weight, which sort of masked it a little bit. But in the time I'd known her, she'd never like done, you know, successfully. I mean, I don't think it is successful. I think, you know, dieting is quite harmful, but you know, like
fully
she'd
fledged
never managed
member of that team.
Yeah,
I spent my years torturing myself, and the freedom when you lose it is wonderful. But
yeah, so it was, and she was beginning to look sort of gaunt as well, and she had sort of a whole sort of range of blood tests at the GP. And we had this new stupid system in London where we were living at the time where you had to book a blood test online, and she couldn't get one till the end of the week or something. And I was like, look, you need to have it beforehand, before the end of the week, like that, you know, you need to know what's wrong with you. And she was just like, oh, blah, blah. Luckily, she had a really good GP who just phoned her up and said, come in now for blood tests and you'll get the results tomorrow, basically. So she fast-tracked her through a treatment centre for getting her bloods done, and did get the results very quickly. And I remember we were sitting down. We'd been at the England women's Euros final in Wembley last year, wasn't it? In July, and we were just. It was like incredible, and we were sitting down.
I've got a daughter that plays football.
Yeah, we were watching the DVD because she was like, let's see if we can see ourselves. And I was like, we were quite high up. I don't think we're going to, but we were going to, like, you know, relive it to an extent. And she got a call from the GP saying to just say, look, I think you need to come into A&E, because she said everything in your blood is down. She said platelets are down, white blood cells are down, albumin levels are down, protein.
I love that you've become this kind of expert.
Yeah, I know.
You have to become a doctor, basically, don't you?
But so anyway, the GP, she said, I heard her on the other end of the phone saying to the GP, do you know why? And the GP obviously didn't know why. But she said, you need to come to A&E, because the GP's concern was that because her platelets were low, she cut herself. She'd bleed a lot if she sort of cut herself at home by accident, which turned out not to really have been a problem.
Not the main concern.
Everything else was. So, what else? So she went. I took her to A&E, just in her, packed a bag, sort of like ran around the house nervously, packing a load of socks. I forgot a toothbrush.
Automatic pilot,
stuff
isn't it?
like that, just sort of really all the nervous energy was going into these stupid tiny things that you can control. So I was like, make sure you take your inhaler and your hand cream and stuff like that. And then she was just sat in the waiting room at the A&E of our local hospital. And our youngest was probably, I don't know, she was 1 year and some months. I can't remember how many at that point. But she was not able to wait in a waiting room. So I went and sat in the hospital cafe briefly, drank like 2 cups of tea because I couldn't eat anything from that point onwards, basically. And then just text her saying, look, she's being really fidgety in the cafe as well. I'm going to go home. She was like, yeah, you should have gone home straight away. Like, she was offering to get a cab to A&E, and I was like, no, I'll take you in, sort of thing. And then eventually she got taken into a ward, I think, and they put her in her own room because she was with her immune system being so down, she was so vulnerable. So I immediately was like, oh my gosh, she's going to get COVID and die in hospital, because I know that happens to so many. Well, it's happened to a lot of people. So I think that was the point at which I was like, we're going to lose her soon, basically. So she went into hospital. They basically confirmed that she had lymphoma, and she'd had quite a history of, obviously refusing the treatment. She'd put something in writing to say she didn't want it.
Wow.
She said that she couldn't face having it, and she said, even though we've got the kids, I can't even do it for the kids. She said I'd have to do it for myself. And it was sort of a point where I just feel like now it should have been so much more dramatic. Like, I should have broken down in tears and run out of the room or something. Because it's just like, I was just like, but how can you say that? I was like, I would have the most painful treatment available to spend an extra day with the kids. Like,
that's made me go all goosebumpy, that has.
Because, how could you not? But I suppose that was, I don't know really, that was her way of expressing it.
And perhaps her way of controlling the uncontrollable, because at this point, were they able to give you any indication of whether treatment would even be effective?
Well,
or whether it would
we did say, because we were talking to a consultant in her room, and he gave us quite a lot of time, and we said, what are the chances at this point if she did have chemo? And he said, well, you'd have to get strong enough for chemo, because with the reflux, she was quite malnourished as well, so like weight loss, reflux, and he sort of went yeah sort of thing. So in, I sort of thought, well, they're not very confident at this point about her getting much longer a life with chemo. And they wanted to do a CT scan, and they spent quite a lot of time talking to her about why they would like to do a CT scan, but she refused to have a CT scan because of the amount of radiation involved.
Oh, you're joking.
Come on, mate. But that was kind of typical. But so they were kind of working blind, so nobody ever gave her a prognosis with a number on it. So she, it was coming up for the weekend, and the doctor was like, look, nothing medical is going to happen over the weekend, and you don't want to be here, do you? And she was like, no, I want to go home now. So they discharged her as quickly as they could manage to. We spoke to palliative care briefly, but they were interested in what drugs they could give her for side effects and symptoms and stuff, and she wasn't interested in any drugs.
And she really was kind of nothing, nothing chemical in her body. She was quite sort of
yeah. Another big thing at the time was she had been disabled at the age of 3, and she had one hand, and she had a cannula in her hand that obviously she had to use for everything. So while she was in hospital, she was in constant discomfort with this cannula, she didn't, like, I walked into her room at the hospital the first time I saw her, and she looked like your typical hospital patient. She hadn't combed her hair. And I was like, come on, Rupa, no. You've got to comb your hair.
Let's get a face wipe out.
Like, because she had 2 gowns on, which is quite a clever way of don't have to do your gown up at the back sort of thing. But I was like, no, you can't start looking like a hospital patient, because it just won't do. Like, that's when you start.
It sounds like she was quite a proud woman as well.
Yeah. So she had bodily autonomy was obviously very, very important. So she'd had a lot of medical treatment when she became disabled, when she was only 3. And obviously you don't.
Personal?
Pardon, sorry.
Can I ask what happened?
Oh, she was in an accident, and she just they had to amputate her hand, basically. So when you're 3, you don't have any say over that sort of thing, do you?
No,
you don't, you can't consent to anything. And she used to tell me she remembers feeling angry remembers thinking, it's my hand, And I don't know what kind of play therapy they had in the late 70s.
Not a lot, I don't imagine.
Children.
Not much now.
No. So I think that probably, at least from that, and probably from other things in her life, she was just like, no, you're not going to do anything to me. And,
And I can understand that.
It varies how I feel about that.
Well, do you know, and I've written down in my notes, are you angry? Because
there
must have been an anger, because there must have been this kind of desperation to save her, and almost watching her refuse treatment.
I was very angry for quite a while. While she was still alive, I went through a very long period of just being angry.
But the fact that you were able to let her have control over her body and autonomy over her body, which is important, and is important if you've had medical care and intervention.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And all the medics understood that. Like, they were like, we don't want you to not have any treatment, but it is up to you.
Because I feel quite angry with Ben. I've got a lot of anger with him for not going diving. And John has some anger with Sarah for not pursuing when she started to have symptoms of bowel cancer, for not pursuing it sooner. And believe me, my dead husband sounds as stubborn as your dead wife.
She was a difficult patient, and so I think the hospital were just like, we don't know what to do with her, and she doesn't want to be here. So she came home on a Friday night, and I think my sister was at home. We had fish and chips, and she had an argument with her mum, who used to live with us, or we used to live with her. So it wasn't normal, because it was like terrible, but she was back home, and I think she was, so the period of time between her going into A&E and her death was 1 month, 1 calendar month, which, if I'd known at the time it was going to happen, I wouldn't have coped with that at all. So I was kind of constantly trying to look for signs that it might be a more comforting, comfortable time period, like 6 months. I thought 6 months I can handle that, enough time to get ready. But obviously nobody can handle any amount of time, can they? But
Well, I'm thinking, so at this point, you know that she's going to die. There is no cure, and there is no
I knew she was
magic.
going to die. She was not
Well,
at all accepting that she was
in
going
denial,
to
was
die.
she?
Not in the slightest, no. She was just like, I'm going to have to do what I did last time. And I was like, but last time you didn't have any symptoms. She couldn't really keep much food down. Taking her in a little box. Sorry. She's sitting in the box now. So yeah, she couldn't keep much food down. She couldn't, and also chemotherapy is harsh and terrible for a reason, isn't it? Because cancer is worse. Like the stuff that the doctor said about the cancer, it was almost like a conscious being. Like it sends out hormones to change how your body works.
It makes me go cold,
Yeah, I didn't know anything about cancer. I've had relatives who died of cancer and a friend. I didn't know anything about how it actually worked on like a cellular level, and it was eating her alive. And I was just pleased that she was able to eat anything. Like when she went into hospital, was the first time in ages she'd started to eat like 3 meals. Because they gave her porridge every morning, like a thin hospital porridge. But I was like, oh my gosh, she's eating something. And I got quite obsessed with her drinking enough squash throughout the day, because I was like, if you don't eat and drink, you'll definitely die sooner.
And again, it's something that you can control. You can say, right, I'm going to make sure you're drinking enough.
Yeah. It's one of the only things. And stuff like I bought a few adaptation bits for the house to try and make stuff easier for her. And it was like a constant preoccupation. And because she wouldn't take painkillers, I got a TENS machine to see if, like, sort of just trying to try different things.
She must have been in agony, the poor woman.
Yeah. I think she'd been living with like really intense discomfort for a really long time. Sort of looking back, you realise how ill she was for a long time. Didn't really realise the extent of it, because it's all sort of isolated symptoms when you're living life at the same time. But yeah, she was at home, and because of the muscle wasting, she found it really difficult to get off the sofa. So I was lifting, I didn't mind lifting her up, up off the sofa and stuff, but she couldn't really leave the house. So I went out with the kids one day. I came home and she was sitting on the floor crying because she couldn't get off the sofa, and she tried to get off by getting onto the floor first. And I was just like, how long have you been like this for? And you didn't tell me. And she'd been there for like an hour or two. And I was like, you should have just told me to come home.
And it's also dehumanizing.
Yeah.
It's like it strips.
And she's quite wrapped up in quite a lot of self-blame for it all as well. Because I think, obviously in our society, when you're a fat person, you are blamed for every single health problem you have. Everything is blamed on being fat. So her fertility stuff, she blamed herself for being fat. Yeah, she was. She carried her weight in a way that a lot of people were quite surprised, but I think she was classed as like morbidly obese or something. But
it's funny, isn't it? I mean, BMI is such an outdated concept anyway. But
I think it's useless.
Well, I actually refused to have my children weighed because I was weighed in year 6, and I was told I was overweight, and I then became chronically bulimic for 20 years. It has a terrible.
I'm going to have to avoid that, because our first kid has been on the 99 point whatever percentile since he was 2 months old, being exclusively breastfed.
You can just say don't weigh them. You can deny it. I didn't realise it, but my friend just took her toddler for a 2-year check, and they told her she was obese, and I was like, Jesus Christ, this is a 2-year-old.
Oh, yeah. No, he definitely probably would be, but I'm going to just wait with the car seats.
So she's got the self-blame as well.
Yeah,
and I know this from experience of friends going to doctors for completely non-weight related problems.
Yeah.
And the first thing they just say is you're overweight. And
yeah.
whilst,
Yeah,
yes, we know that weight contributes to many different factors and it's important to maintain a healthy weight, yada, yada.
Yeah.
But also, I know many people who are classed as overweight or obese who are in fine fitness, who can probably outrun me, you know? And, but yes, sorry, I'm one of my tangents, but the thought of her then self-blaming herself is really, really sad.
That ran through the whole time, and it was very sad. And I was like, look, you need help, because when she came home from A&E, we didn't have any support. We didn't have, you know how hard it is to get people like occupational therapy to come and look at your house. It just doesn't happen. And the GP did try really hard. We had one really excellent Rupa's GP was excellent, and actually I wrote to her behind her back because I was just thinking, what the hell can I do to try and make her do something? And I said, look, she's got this idea. Teletubbies, I know. She's got this idea that everything's her fault, but actually it's not, and she needs a lot of support, but she's not going to ask for it, sort of thing. So she didn't obviously reply or anything. I don't think you're meant to write about your spouse, are you? But
you'll try anything, right?
But yeah, but she called her in for an appointment. I should think on the back of that. She didn't. Rupa certainly didn't. And sort of, said she would start to try putting things in place like counselling, occupational therapy and stuff. And then I think she also, I tried to approach the local hospice before that point, that Rupa had said in hospital, I don't want the hospice, I don't want anything, basically. So they said, we can't do anything because she hasn't asked to be referred. So then I said, do you want to ask to be referred by the GP? And
please.
The GP, I think, referred her, yeah. And I referred myself as a family member because apparently you can do that. So I was like, well, I need help anyway, so help. And so she must have been at home for maybe 2 weeks, 10 days, something like that. And every morning I was worried that I was going to come downstairs and find her having died in the night, like either from the cancer or from a fall or something, because we had like quite a tall house, and I was in the loft room with the kids and she was a floor down. And obviously I was like trying to look after the kids overnight because they were both still waking at this point. So,
God!
I should have had like a baby monitor or something, but I was so like overwhelmed. I was just like, look, you're really ill. Like you can have like support. And someone from the hospice came to speak to her, and she'd also another point at which I knew we were going to lose her quite soon was the fact that she had fluid on her tummy as well as her legs. So it was like right in the middle of her abdomen, and I was like, well, I thought this is obviously a very essential part of your body, like that's going wrong. I remember just giving her a big hug in the kitchen one day and just thinking, shit, this is near the end. But she was stood up and walking around at that point, which is a theme as well throughout, that she was carrying on again stubbornly, doing what she could. But the hospice nurse said, we can try and drain the fluid from your tummy, because it was stopping her from eating very much as well. And obviously must have been very uncomfortable. And also the drinking enough as well. I think that was stopping that too. So, so she was like, yeah, okay, like, well, go and have that done. And then I think when she got into the hospice, again, she went to the hospice in a taxi, and sent me a little video on the first night, because I just did the little stay and play with the kids and went home, and then I didn't go to visit her till the second day she'd been in there. So I think when she got in there, everything really kicked up a gear, and I think they realised how ill she was as well.
Yeah.
Because they said that, well, the fluid on the tummy thing, they said it wasn't bad enough to do the procedure that they'd planned to do. Like there wasn't enough pressure behind it, so nothing would happen. Oh, thank you, ladies. And they realised that she had like a constant temperature, which is a thing with lymphoma, but they were quite worried about her having an infection even going into the hospice. So again, she got her own room because she was highly vulnerable. Yeah, it's a bonus. Because she wasn't going in there to die. She was going to have her symptoms treated. They expected her to be in there about like a week or so. And then also when you're in the hospice, professionals go and see you all the time. So occupational therapy actually kicked in, came to speak to me about what she needed. The counselling guy she had her first session with a counsellor, like while she was there. She had one of those chairs that can lift you up and everything, so it was a bit more dignified. She had she was basically like sitting and watching videos about Pan-Asian street food. That was her main, because she must have been so hungry. And I was going in to see him every day. Our oldest son was in 4-day-a-week childcare, so I was taking the younger one in every day. And of course, she was just like a little ray of sunshine because she didn't care. She didn't realise it was a
This
hospital.
is exactly what I say about Tabby.
Yeah,
because
she
don't
loved
know
going
what's
up and
going
then
on.
No, I've got a video of her actually from when Rupa was in the hospital for 2 nights, and she had the bedside table on wheels, and our daughter was just sitting in between the wheelie bit, wheeling it backwards and forwards with absolute delight. And I was like, okay, maybe
having a
enough
whale
of
of
that
a
now.
time.
Yeah, oh yeah. And of course, every plug in the hospice room she wanted to unplug and stuff. So it was slightly stressful. But, they had a garden that we could go to for a bit as well.
And where was this? Was this while you were still in London?
Yeah, so the hospice is in Hackney. And it served, we were in Newham, it served a few boroughs, quite a big hospice, I guess. So that was our local one. And that's where Rupa grew up, actually, was in Hackney. But yeah, I think she was just like uncomfortable a lot of the time. She was also, another sort of theme of her being ill, she was very, very hesitant to tell, or quite adamant about not telling anybody really that she was ill. I persuaded her to tell her cousins. I think it was me who sort of at least suggested it anyway, and she did tell them in the end, and her best friend as well. I was like, I think you need to tell her. And she did go and see her while she was in the hospice, in a sort of flying visit, because she's from Manchester. So, but yeah, everybody else, I was like, I think so and so would be quite a good help, and she was like, oh my god, she's so much of a do-gooder.
And
don't tell her,
because you're carrying the burden of all this, and you probably needed somebody to talk to. And again, I've just made a note here because and I will talk to John in the wash-up session we do after this record, because Sarah was the same. She didn't want people to know.
Really?
She was a very proud woman.
Yeah.
And he said it was quite difficult because he was reeling with this, devastation, but he couldn't really talk publicly about it.
No. Yeah, I did. I chose, obviously, I spoke to my parents, and I chose one friend who I told, and she'd text to check in every other day. She was very good. And then we had some sort of contact from one of our kiddie things, who took our son for a little bit, a few hours, a couple of times. And had some medical knowledge as well. So I was able to sort of say to her, look, Rupa's insistent she's going to make it, and she's not, is she? And she was like, well, I'm sorry, no, she's really ill and she needs looking after, sort of thing. So that was quite a relief to be able to say that to somebody, and we saw her quite regularly. So yeah, there was that. But yeah, I did sort of, if I didn't really talk to our sort of group of mum friends through that time at all, because it's just sort of felt so wrong talking about our kids, funny things our kids have said or something like that.
And then by the way, my wife's in the hospice.
Yeah, exactly. Just couldn't say what was actually going on.
It's so
and,
alienating.
I sort of avoided a neighbour and stuff like that. Yeah.
It's that whole troll under the bridge. You don't know where you fit in the world. And your wife she's not dead, but she's not going to live. And and like you say, and I'm terrible at dropping the dead husband bomb on the school run. But in that moment where you're trying to keep things quite private, and there's sort of normality going on around you. And I mean, did she at any point accept that she was going to die, or was it something she kind of clung on to till the end?
She didn't accept it in so many words to me. She did say at one point, I might never be completely well again. And I just sort of said, well, yeah, I know. And I said, I've been at the same doctor's appointments as you, and I've heard them say the same things. And yet we've obviously heard something completely different to each other because they've explained to you in quite a lot of detail how every area of your body is not working properly and how nothing is going to make it work. And all she was just sort of clinging to. She had some sort of nutritional supplements that she was insisting on taking every day that were not anything, special. And she found that she could eat Heinz tomato soup, cream of tomato soup. So she was eating 3 meals a day, which I was like, well, I'm happy with that. She's able to eat. She's not, she's obviously not eating enough, but she's able to eat something. She's got her sort of routine of her medications, and she's at least, somewhere where, and she did fall over at one point actually in the hospice, and she said the cleaner was really worried because she just cleaned the floor, but she said, I put the sign there, and she was like, that I'm going to write it down in writing that it wasn't your fault. Okay, you don't need to worry. But I think it came after a bit of a low point, and she said, actually, since I fell over, I felt better. Like I felt more happy. I don't know if it was a surge of adrenaline or something.
Possibly.
Because I had to come and get her off the floor. Like it was not very comfortable. But yeah, she was just like, oh, it's funny, but I do kind of feel better since I fell over. But at least, if she'd done that at home, I'd have had to call an ambulance. It would have been really not ideal, would it? So...
John did it when he was in hospital with COVID. He got up to try and turn the light out, forgetting that he had been in a coma for a month and couldn't move, and was found on the floor. And again, another stubborn one. And you said that she was in the hospice. How long? So she'd gone back in. Did she ever come home again, or was she?
No,
that was it then?
No. She was there for 12 days. And we initially talked about getting her home to our house in London, but it was so not suitable because it was an old Victorian house with steep stairs. And we had like the first floor as our sitting room because our mum had the ground floor as her sitting room. There wasn't a lot of living space on the ground floor. So it's like, Victorian houses have a lot of rooms, but they don't have a lot of space. So... Rupa had bought a house in Cardiff that was intended for us all to move to for, a complete relocation of our lives anyway. So we were focused on getting her to this house, to the Cardiff house. So that was on the Friday, must have been a Friday before she died, because a lot of the doctors came into the room and said, I think our next focus has got to be, if you want to be in Cardiff, get to Cardiff before you're too weak. and they said, we can give you contacts for a private ambulance for Rupa to travel in, so that she could travel in a sort of semi-reclined position. Link you up with the occupational therapy there, so that you can have one of those chairs on the ground floor or even on the first floor. It's a wider space to get equipment into and stuff. So I was like, writing notes about how to try and set that up the following Monday, not to move the following Monday, but to start making calls and stuff, which did feel quite overwhelming. And I thought, oh my gosh, she's going to be going there to die, basically. So it was quite emotional. And then on the Saturday, the day after that, I was getting quite sick of just the kids sitting in the car, driving to the hospice, sitting at the hospice, driving home. So I was like, they're going to do their dance class in the morning, and then I'm going to get the train to Hackney to go and see you. So that we're outside at least for a bit longer. It was February, but it was like I was like a bit sick of being cooped up all the time.
I need my green and blue.
Yeah, and the hospice is obviously, understandably, very, very, very warm place, and I don't like warm atmospheres at all. And in sort of enclosed, the kids have to behave to a certain level. They were quite tolerant, but yeah,
it's just another thing you don't want to have to worry about, isn't it? Is my kid unplugging somebody's vital piece of information across the room?
I know. So I said, we'll come and see you, but I'm going to take the train, so it'll take a bit longer after ballet class, And I got quite a confused text from her that morning, so I phoned her, and she was upset on the phone, and she said she was confused about something to do with her cousin bringing her mum to see her. And I was like, okay, don't worry, you're obviously upset, don't worry about it, I'll make sure it's all okay and let you know. I phoned her cousin, and she was like, I don't know where she's got that from, like something's a bit off. So I just texted her saying, everything's going to happen as planned, don't worry, it's all okay, basically. And then took the kids to the hospice. It's quite a long train, like a bit of a convoluted train journey, but not too bad, really. And then by the time we got there, I think her family had been and gone to see her. And then when we got there, she was really confused, like she was not herself. And it was like a Saturday staffing, so it's just not as good, basically.
It's such a weird phenomenon, isn't it, that hospitals are, and like doctor surgeries aren't open at the weekend, when people don't not get ill at the weekend. It baffles
and everybody me. It's so weird because everyone works shifts anyway.
So
it's like, well, I guess nobody wants the weekend shifts, so they get people who don't do it as often. Maybe they just pick up the odd weekend or something.
Bit of skeleton staff.
So I was sort of trying to get the nurses to understand, like, she needs somebody to work out what's going on, because she didn't really want to talk to me. She asked me to wash her feet, which I did, because she said, oh, my feet are filthy, wash my feet. Obviously they weren't filthy. She hadn't left her chair for like a week.
I bet it felt nice.
I washed her feet. And obviously the kids were going mental, and she was too stressed out to cope with them. So she was just like, look, you need to go at about 4:30. And I was like, okay. And I sort of got her to say goodbye to the kids. She wasn't really there. And I said to the nurses on the station as I went, look, can somebody go in and see her? Because, like, something's just wrong. I can't really tell you what, but and they were like making a bit of a fuss of the kids, and I was like, no, can you concentrate on my wife, please?
I'll do the kids.
Yeah. I was like, if you like babies that much, work on maternity or something. Like, wife, please. And then I was on my way home getting some food from a Sainsbury's local, I think, for that evening. And my son
weird bits of information we remember.
Yes, very clearly, yeah. My son was just playing up and putting all this, cakes in the shopping basket and shouting his head off, getting in the way of the other shoppers, lying down in the aisle and stuff because I guess he was
being
tired.
kids, right?
Yeah. And I got a call from a locum doctor on the hospice ward, and she said, "Look, I don't know Rupa because I'm a locum. What is she normally like?" And I said, "Not like she is today." I said, "She's confused today, and she's not normally like this." And I said she was declining painkillers earlier, and I said but she's obviously uncomfortable, so I don't know if she needs motivation. I said, talk to her about the fact that we're planning this move to Cardiff and stuff, and she needs to get comfortable for that. And she said, no, she's taken painkillers and she's taken some antibiotics because she's got cellulitis. And I was like, oh, okay, what is that? And she said, oh, it's a skin infection. And I was like, okay, but she's taken antibiotics. And this locum doctor said, yes, she's taken antibiotics. So I was like, okay, fine. So we were planning to go to London Zoo the next day with the kids. It's like something actually nice to do instead of go to a hospice every day with my sister. So I remember texting my mum and saying, I'm a lot happier now that I know she's got antibiotics and painkillers. And my mum was like, yeah, you don't need to go and check on her tomorrow. It's not going to make a difference to her care. Just go to the zoo and enjoy it. And her old boss was going to see her the next day as well. So who knew her well. So I was like, okay, it's fine. We've got someone going in. And I know she's taken some meds, which is an achievement, to be honest.
And a relief for you, I imagine.
But yeah, I didn't know anything about cellulitis really or what it meant. And then I went home and we had dinner, and then I had put the kids to bed. The oldest was asleep. The youngest was being hyper, much like she is now, wriggling around still. And I always had, at that time, I had my phone under my pillow because I didn't really have a bedside table. And I was like, I need to be able to get to my phone if someone calls. And then the nurse that Rupa actually did love to see when she was on shift phoned me on my phone. I sort of answered it and I thought, here we go. And she said, look, I got on shift about half an hour ago and Rupa is not really responding. She said, you need to come, as in the moment where you need to come. So I was like, of course. So and I was just thinking, right, logistically I need to get 2 kids in the car and my mother-in-law, and I was sort of thinking, because I've known a few relatives obviously who've died, and as have most of us, and quite often everybody thinks this is it and everyone sort of gathers around and holds their breath, and then there's like 3 days and then everyone goes home and has a shower and then they die, sort of thing. So I was like, right, we're going to be in for a bit of a long haul possibly. I took some spare knickers or some toys for the kids or whatever,
snacks,
blankets, and then I put the little one in a sling on my back and then carried the big one still asleep down the stairs. He is big and it was hard, but I was like, this is the only way I'm going to do it. Impressed upon my mother-in-law that she was really, really unwell and we had to go and see her now. She was great, actually, got ready very quickly. I was like, and it's very cold
in the middle
outside.
Of the night.
Right, it was a very clear night. You could see stars in London, like it was really cold. Got everyone in the car, woke the oldest up in the process because I can't really get kids into car seats.
Can barely do it when they're awake, let alone asleep.
Every single time.
Every single time.
Yeah. So drove to Hackney, and then got to the hospice, and you had to go through the reception, and usually you sort of sign in and say who you are and stuff. And I said, oh, hello. I said, I'm here to see a patient. And this was like 11 o'clock at night, I think, by this point. So I was like, why else would I be here? But they obviously knew we were coming. So we sort of went up, obviously. I knew it well. And then the nurse, the sort of favourite nurse, her name's Cheryl, greeted us. Okay, Bubba. She greeted us at the entrance to the ward and took us past Rupa's room. The doors were closed in Rupa's room. And I thought, okay, so she's going to give us a brief of how, bad it is. Oh, Bubba. Took us to a family room, and then she took me outside of the family room. And she said, I'm terribly sorry, but she's died while you were on your way.
Oh, my goodness.
So I was like, oh, right. And she was like,
I'm so
I didn't
sorry.
want to tell you because you'd been driving. I was like, yeah, I would have been driving. So, yeah, I was just like, oh, right, she's just died.
Just like that.
Yeah. So I said, did she take any pain relief? Was she okay? And she said she took. So this was, I think she died at around 10:30, 11:45. I'm not sure exactly. But she said she was able to swallow and took oral painkillers at 9:30. That, she wasn't due another dose for a while. She had said she'd had her lunch, her soup lunch, and she took painkillers at 9:30, and then she was just unconscious.
And that was it.
And yeah, she said, I've got no doubt that she definitely wasn't in pain. And I said, okay, because I was worried because they couldn't find her veins very easily. So I was worried she'd need a syringe driver or something. And I was like, how are they going to manage the syringe driver? But the nurse was like, oh no, if she'd needed an injection, I could have just given her a normal injection. But she said, she was like just on the oral pain meds.
And 2 hours later, she's gone.
Yeah. So
that must have been just devastating. And just remind me how old your children were, because they were very young, weren't they?
Yeah, so the oldest was 3, and he turned 4 in April, so he was sort of nearly 4.
Yeah.
And the youngest at this point was, I think, 15 months.
So in many ways, the youngest one's the easiest because they just need feeding, carrying, a little bit of baby massage or something. But for a 3, almost 4-year-old, to accept that, one of their mothers has gone, and that must have been a very difficult conversation to have. And things like starting school quite soon after as well. Were they supportive?
Well, I've kind of yet to tell, really, because
I suppose it's early days, isn't it?
2 weeks. Yeah, I did email his class teacher, telling her in quite a lot of detail what had happened, and it was just before summer, and she didn't reply. And I emailed her saying, "Have you got this okay?" And she just replied saying, "Oh yeah, I passed it on to so and so and so and so." And I was like, "Oh okay." And I was like, "But you read it, right?" Because I was like, the main thing I want is for you to know the circumstances as the person who's going to be the most in contact with him. But I think she's read it. I mean, they've
and you
not
just
really.
hope to avoid.
I think a lot of even if you're a professional, a lot of people are awkward about death.
Oh, absolutely. And I remember getting a book home, and it would have been, I think it must have been Hector, because he'd just started primary school, and the book came home, and it was about a dad who'd gone out on a boat, and they thought they'd lost him, and then they found him. And I just remember going into the teacher and saying, in what world was this appropriate for you to give to my child? But it was a TA that had, crossed over from another class and, had just picked a book at the right level. And people don't deliberately try and do cruel things, but it's so, you just need them to be aware, don't you? And we celebrate Father's Day and Mother's Day in that, I get John a card from the kids, he gets me one from the kids. Ben and I were never big celebrations of that. But of course, a Mother's Day is each one is going to sting as they get older. Now, I'm going to ask you as well, do you feel that your experience was different because you were a gay couple? Did you each time have to explain that this was your wife? Because I know with speaking to, I've had a couple of gay guys on, and one was treated very differently, and one really found that it didn't kind of have much impact.
especially I think also the NHS seems to be staffed quite a lot by gay people.
Oh, does
And
it?
also the hospice, yeah, it was in our area. With the hospice movement, I think they've got a long history of working, obviously, unfortunately, with gay men
Yeah.
from the 80s and 90s, but also a lot of gay people worked there as well. And it was in stark contrast to my experience of maternity services. So in maternity, every midwife who didn't know me, because I luckily had quite a consistent midwife care, but if they didn't know me, they would be, oh, so your husband so and so and so. And I was like, for a start, like, not everyone's married, are they, these
Yeah.
days when they have a baby?
Yeah.
And also, I don't have a husband. And does it not say, I suppose if you have assisted conception, you can be straight, can't you? But yeah, I was like, oh no, yeah, I've never had a husband. And then contraception, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, no contraception.
No, we're all good on that front.
Yes.
And
But with the hospice, no, I think only one pharmacist said to Rupa, your husband can get this for you. And Rupa was like, this is my wife. And I was like, hi. But no, everybody else, no. I think
and I'm
about half
guessing
the
that
staff
London
are gay,
perhaps is a little bit more progressive as well. I think perhaps when you are accessing facilities, perhaps more rurally, you maybe don't get the same and enlightenment that you perhaps get in a London
I
hospital and
think
hospice.
a lot of it as well is that everybody dies. So everybody, whether you're straight or gay, you definitely die, and you definitely have to use some sort of end of life, or if you're lucky enough to access it, you can use end of life care. But because assisted conception isn't as successful as natural conception statistically, probably not as many lesbians have babies. And a higher proportion, I think, probably choose to adopt still as well.
Yeah.
They just haven't come across it as much, maybe especially not in our area of East London.
Yeah.
They're so entrenched in husband-wife sort of.
I mean, and actually there's been this enormous sort of change to the law, because previously, if you weren't married but you had children, you weren't able to access any of the funding that was available. So presumably the fact that you were married helped.
Yes,
you were able to at least get
I mean,
all
the
those
first instance it helped him was that I was unquestionably Rupa's next of kin. So the reason I was taken out of the family room first is because they all knew that I was next of kin, and so they knew exactly the protocol, and they knew I would be registering the death. They need to phone me first to tell me first to give me the death
and it is those things that matter.
Yeah. But before you're one of your guests the other, well, I listened to it the other day. I don't know when you recorded it, but the American lady was talking about disenfranchised grief because it was her ex. And I just thought, before gay marriage and gay rights, every same-sex surviving partner had disenfranchised grief because they didn't exist as far as the system.
That's made me feel really, that's made me feel really sad, actually, because you're so right, and your grief just didn't previously would not have been seen as valid.
And when it was also not socially acceptable, that it was a housemate or something, it was your lodger.
Of course,
or your friend or something, and nobody.
And now you're sort of putting your head back up above that parapet, and you're telling your story, which is really brave, really, really brave. And I hope really helpful for lots of people. And you have, one of your children has started school, and I've now met your other one, who is absolutely gorgeous.
He's just fallen asleep.
I did just now, perfectly. End of the interview, perfect. And I suppose I just wanted to know what life looks like for you. Have you created a new life in Cardiff? Do you have a network of support? Are you well looked after?
I'm sort of starting to, with the start of term, the sort of little stay and play for the babies have started again as well. So I've started going to those. I've got a cold this week, so I'm not doing anything. Everybody's
got a cold this week, I think.
Run. Yeah. it's the school cold. It's kind of,
It's the school cold.
my son had it overnight, and that was it.
Oh, but we get it
I'm
for
going to
days.
have it for about 2 weeks, I think. So yeah.
Yes,
So,
just you wait till Nix comes home.
So yeah, we've had a message. I've sprayed some stuff on that apparently protects, but who knows?
I know. I've been picking nits out of hair all summer. It's been the summer of nits.
Oh no.
Well,
so yeah, it's sort of getting there.
It's been really, really, really interesting to talk to you and to hear your experience, because actually the way that you describe Rupa and her relationship with her illness, I've not had anybody talk about it like this before. I've had plenty of stubborn men usually, but to have such conviction that she wasn't going to die right up until the end is kind of heartbreaking. But I also really love her spirit, and I also noticed that you refer to her in present tense quite a lot when you talk about her. And it's only the sort of thing that you'd notice if you do what I do. And I thought, she's still so with you, isn't she?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Well, my love, I wish you so much healing and happiness, and I hope and I know that you are going to raise those children knowing who Rupa was and what she meant to you and to them. And the only bit of advice I can ever give other mothers going through something like this is just not to shy away from talking about them, to have the pictures up. And, I find dropping it in conversationally rather than making it, let's sit down and talk about your dead parent. It's hard, and you're in a really hard point in your life because you have a toddler and a child that's just started school, and that's tough without your person. So I admire you, and I'm really grateful that you told me your story today.
Thank you. Yeah.
And if anybody has been affected by today's story and would like to reach out to either myself, or I'm sure Claire would happily answer any questions, I'm offering up her services here. I won't give your number out, Claire, don't worry. And the more stories like this that we hear, the more stories that we project out into the world, the more understanding that we create, and the kinder the world becomes for people like us who did not expect to be widowed in our 30s, who did not expect to navigate a world without the person that we had come to expect to be by our side for our whole life. So just thank you from me, and thank you from everybody that's listening for having the courage to do this today. I wish you every happiness.
Thank you.
And for the rest of you guys, do keep checking in with us. We'll be back on Friday, and just take care of yourselves.